Colin. He's an anarchist poet, and he's occupying a tent here, and he was recently arrested and went on a hunger strike.
Thank you, everyone. My name's Colin Mohmeyer. I've been living in White River Junction, Vermont for the past 5 years before Occupy started, in a beautiful arts community where I did environmental organizing and alternative mental health, mad movement organizing, and intentional community organizing on a daily basis. And I made it to Occupy Boston on October 2nd. As an organizer, I tented for 9 days. I went back to Vermont for a month and kept protesting in Vermont. On November 5th, I gave up everything. But it wasn't the material things that mattered, it was the community and the civil disobedience that ripped me apart there. So I went to Boston November 5th with nothing, with my house in my pockets. Because I've been homeless on and off since 16 years old, going back 15 years. So what system is this when it's just designed for those it's working for? And I made a sign that said that in Vermont. Eventually we went to DC. 46 states of occupiers were brought to Occupy DC from around the country by the SEIU unions. 55 Occupy Boston people went on a bus together by the unions, the SEIU union. I was there when we took K Street, under the top lobbyist firms of the country, through Citizens United, put unprecedented billions in the backs of politicians' pockets. We took 4 consecutive intersections and held them for 3 hours. I was dragged 30 feet by police officers after being zip-cuffed on the ground in the rain. And we had objects in that street. We were laying down on couches and standing on newspaper boxes. And we had the first national Occupy JLGA that I know for the men, because they segregate you. And the paddy wagon was great. And then I made it to Raleigh because I was on the verge of walking pneumonia. Occupy DC is a cold, ugly place to be homeless in the winter or at any time. Where do you go to the bathroom in DC, in downtown DC, if you live in a tent or on their grates? There's nowhere. You go in a museum and go through security. There's nothing there for anyone but the elite and the divide of the poor. So I made it to Raleigh. I met up the day I got there at 5 in the morning. Sprinklers were going off on Capitol Hall lawns, or whatever, Capitol lawn. Grass, green grass. We don't see that. I've been in New England too long. I met Paul, who's out here somewhere. I don't see him, but from Occupy Wall Street, a refugee as well, who left with the Occupy marchers who had walked from Occupy Wall Street to DC and made it in Raleigh the day I arrived there in the afternoon, and were taken down, 6 of them, in their own civil disobedience of not leaving the street. Sarah was dragged or tackled or such by cops as holding the American flag. The same thing happened in Boston on the Veterans for Peace when 141 people were taken down. So my conflict with the police is based on the fabric through which they tear through my life, my communities, the urban communities of this country, of minorities, of the barrios, of queer communities and activists who can go home after a march. So I went to Durham with the Occupy marchers. I didn't walk. I was still pretty sick. I didn't have a voice. But the freedom in this movement is inexorable, because we're not returning to meaninglessness, bureaucracy, mazes of police violence, and militarization of the world again. And you're not allowed to say that before the Occupy movement to your friends, never mind in a public square, because of shadow forces of law enforcement agencies. So I'll make it short here, but I was arrested the other night here, panhandling, as 2 passersby walked by, asked for $1 casually, and 2 officers happened to be nearby and heard it. And they came up to me and I cited most of their questions except my name and my birth date, from what I remember. And then they started to walk away and then said, wait, I'm going to arrest this guy. Officer Osborne and Officer Kramer pursued me as I fled into the center of the street to sit down, as they would arrest me in the center of the street as I nonviolently resisted. Because I prefer a higher moral order than a violent society. And that means you can, if I'm going to break the law, then you'll have to break the enforcement of it on my back. Because even though the law may be inflexible or blind, human beings are not. All human beings are not. So, I went on a hunger strike at 1 a.m. after being in the Orange County Jail in Hillsborough, NC, where they transported me to, the same officers. And I was on that hunger strike for 15 hours, and it was indefinite because I didn't know how long they would detain me. So I extrajudicially hunger striked. Just like they extrajudicially assassinate American citizens now abroad, or will do it in detainment in FEMA camps through the NDAA Act, where people in D.C., Occupy D.C., are having nervous breakdowns and leaving because of these bills that are popping off in our faces there for the 12 days I was there. Cops watch on as citizens do hit and runs in the middle of marches when our numbers thin out in Boston and D.C. So the last part, I have court date here. It may be the 1st, it may be the 7th of this month, but I've got different reports on that. And I should be clear that from them which one it is, but anyways, I may plea by hunger strike. I'm considering it. I don't need to plea within the legal system's design. I can plea with a moral order. I'm in this area because my Zen teacher of long time, affiliated with the Vermont Rinzai Center I was practicing in a Buddhist meditation, is located in Pittsburgh nearby. So I'm informed by 9 years of meditation practice that brought me sobriety 9 years ago. But I don't need to be Gandhi either. I can be myself, and that's my obligation. And you should let me and my community self-determine that. So when I got out of jail, I wrote up an account. And Occupy Chapel Hill's Twitter feed reposted it, so you can check that out. And I wrote a little thing, too, a little short piece of a poem. I'm Tense, the anarcho-poet. I'm one of very few people left here. And this little phrase says, I resist, immediately and non-violently on every level at any time. And if they cannot see mine or others' humanity, then we will train them in it, until it bleeds through us unmistakably. Thank you.